So what I'll do is I'll walk us through sort of what we are finding on our side as to what is the plan of the provincial government. Why are they sort of declaring one of the biggest provincial layoffs in its history, but also defunding one of the most strategic sectors we have here in Ontario, which is our public colleges. So I'm going to share a few slides right now, and I can walk us through. Brilliant. Okay. Again, just I know I quickly to introduce myself. I'm a policy researcher with OPSEU, and over the past 4 months, what I've been trying to figure out is essentially we are seeing cuts across the college sector, and they've been quite systemic. Of course, there's been a ramp up this year where we are seeing more layoffs, potential rumors of mergers, closures, but this has been happening for a while now. And we've also been seeing in sort of provincial budget after budget that the amount of funding that's going to the post-secondary education sector, which includes colleges and universities, does not keep up with inflation. In fact, in this year's provincial budget, we saw that the funding is actually going down over the next 3 years. So that in itself raises alarms as to where the government's priority is as it comes to critical post-secondary education. So again, everyone here, I don't need to sort of reiterate why colleges are so important, but a lot of the data that has been coming out over this year has shown that colleges are not only important because they provide good education, they help sort of graduates find jobs, they are the backbone of the local economy, but they're especially essential and crucial in rural and small and medium-sized communities where most of the college graduates are local students. They stay locally, they contribute locally. In some parts of the province, they contribute over 50% of sort of the region's GDP comes from sort of local graduates who stay work locally as well. We also see that these colleges have a proven track record. Year after year, we see over 80 to 90% satisfaction from employers. So it's not a broken sort of system in terms of employer satisfaction, because that's what we've seen year after year, that employers do love the graduates that graduate from the colleges. And essentially, we also see that we are in the middle of a skills worker shortage in this province, with many workers who are set to retire over the next 2 years. And we are also seeing a rise in the number of high school age students who will be ready to go into potentially post-secondary education in the next 4 to 6 years, increase by close to 27%. So this is essentially the context in which we are seeing historic sort of layoffs as well as closures of programs across the province, which goes against any logic or any rationale. So what we went into doing is understanding the local impacts. As I mentioned, a lot of research has shown that the most devastating impact of these closures will be on small and medium-sized communities, especially northern communities where there is no other college or other educational program for, in some cases, 1,000-kilometer radius. Now, this is what is at stake when we talk about the defunding of public education that's happening in the colleges sector. So I've shared a few examples, and again, I can share the slide deck with everyone after, but some of the areas we've been focusing on, for example, is Thunder Bay, where we have Confederation College, which has seen a massive sort of reduction in staff, but also reduction in and closures of programs that are critical to local economy, identity, and food sovereignty. One example is the culinary management program. There is no other similar program in sort of a 1,000-kilometer radius. We saw businesses, hotel chain owners come out and sign petition and organize to save this program, which is so critical to food sovereignty in Thunder Bay. And despite all of the support and high enrollment numbers for this particular program, we still saw it be completely cancelled, which means that if you're in Thunder Bay and you want to study culinary management, you'll have to go somewhere else. You have to move out of your community. We are seeing this all across the province. We see this in Timmins, where it's not only have they closed lots of programs, they've entirely shut down a training division with certified diamond drilling and millwright professionals. And instead, the government went and took that money and gave it to a local mining company, a $10 million slush fund to Agnico Eagles, which is a mining company, to essentially duplicate and recreate these programs that they closed anyway. And these programs were quite successful. It is directly linked to its local economy. So what we are seeing is a direct transfer of money from colleges, from tried and proven and tested programs into private hands. And often there is sort of a perception that maybe private training is more cheap, it's maybe more efficient, maybe private does it better. This is what we hear all the time in the work that we do. So we went and we looked at public accounts, we crunched the numbers, and it's just not true. Privatization is costly, it hurts us all. Public colleges per student funding is around $7,000 per year in Ontario, which is nowhere near where it should be. But in the corporate training that we're talking about, that is taking over some of this public college training, and also with less transparency. And most of the time, these are not a full education. They're often 6-week training programs, and they range somewhere from $10,000 to $15,000 per student, which is sometimes twice, 3 times more expensive than just doing it at the colleges, which has been happening for a long time. The story repeats itself. We've not only seen program closures, we've seen campus closures. So for example, Algonquin College in Perth is entirely shut down. So in that community, where Algonquin College's Perth campus was central to carpentry and heritage programs, absolutely disappeared. And one last example is Loyalist College. I'm sure you might have seen it in the news. So Loyalist is one of 2 colleges which could potentially shut down in the next year. It is seeing massive deficits. It's seeing sort of cuts like no other place, and could potentially shutter its doors. And Loyalist College is based in Belleville and Prince Edward County, and that's where they're shutting down culinary and hospitality programs, where these sectors are some of the backbone of that economy. So all of this to say that the local impacts are, of course, devastating, but it also does not make sense. There is no bigger plan. It does not benefit the public or the future of these communities. So then that got us thinking, so what is the province's plan for our colleges? So it's clearly detrimental. It's not cheaper. It's in fact more expensive to do this privatization and sort of defunding of colleges. And we are seeing mass layoffs in the middle of an unemployment crisis, not just in Ontario, but all across Canada, where we are seeing in some places like Windsor, double-digit unemployment rates, which is massive, which is the highest we've seen in around 20 years. So that's what brings us to sort of the links that we found with the Skills Development Fund that Peggy referenced. So the Skills Development Fund was launched by the Ford government in 2021, and it was supposed to be a training fund to help bridge the gap. And since then, it has mushroomed into something way bigger than anyone would have imagined. So while colleges have seen their public funding go down year after year by 30%, in that same time period, since 2021, SDF has seen its funding go up by over 800%. So you can imagine the number figure behind 800%. We've seen that the SDF fund is only open to private companies and corporations. Colleges can apply, but they can apply only in partnership with a private corporation, nonprofit, or another entity. While we see colleges funding per student be around $7,000 roughly, in some of the SDF training, what they have reported, which we don't even know how accurate it is around $10,000 to, in some cases, $30,000 per student for what could be a 6-week training. While colleges see 10,000 layoffs, over 600 program closures, this fund is getting lots of money. There is no public reporting, no project level outcomes. We've tried to dig, ask for information. There's very little that we can actually find to prove that any of their claims are actually true. So this is essentially sort of the bigger picture that we're seeing behind the layoffs and the program closures and the local impacts. So in terms of what have we learned so far, some key figures. As I mentioned, college funding has declined, and there was a blue ribbon panel that asked for $1.4 billion of emergency funding, and this was released 2 years ago. Till this date, the Skills Development Fund, on the other hand, which is going to mostly private companies, has seen a commitment of $2.5 billion from the government. So that not only is more than the emergency funding that the colleges needed, but it's significantly more. And colleges can't apply directly. We don't know how this is going to be used. A lot of it is used to create competing programs that already exist in our colleges, which is right out of the playbook of sort of what we've seen in this privatization plan. And what we've also found is that most of this money is going to private companies and hands based in the Greater Toronto area. So while they're shutting down programs in Belleville, in Timmins, in Thunder Bay, the money is going to companies and luxury hotel and boutique hotel chains based around the GTA. One of the most notorious ones is Scale Hospitality. If folks have been following the Greenbelt scandal, they were named and shamed for lobbying one of the staffers within the Ford government. And similarly, we have Canadian Niagara Hotels, Ontario Shipyards. They've gotten 10, 11 million and upwards of funding from this fund, while colleges are shuttering their doors. And we are also seeing some very concerning sort of links between the funding going to certain private corporations and friends for political consent, to buy political consent, to buy political votes in 14 out of the 17 ridings that flipped in 2024-25 to conservative representation also received a lot of this SDF funding. And this is something we're investigating further as well. But there seems to be sort of a bigger agenda, and the agenda is one of privatization, creating slush funds and tossing money out of public hands into these sort of black boxes that we know nothing about. So that leads us to what would have happened if the money didn't go to these places and actually stayed within the public education sector, the post-secondary education sector. We would have seen sort of 500, we would have seen 10,000 jobs being saved. We would have seen sort of folks that are being affected by tariffs and who are looking to skill and reskill right now have options. And we would be planning for a future in this province that actually protected the generations to come, especially as we see number of college-aged students increase in the next 6 years. And then my final point, and I'll stop after this, is essentially, this is not a new project or a plan. We all know of how privatization is plaguing every sector of not just public education, but our public sector to begin with, whether that's healthcare, education, or beyond. And a similar project was undertaken in Australia in 2013 and between 2013 and 2018, where Australia cut over $3 billion of public funding to its equivalent college system, and it spelled absolute disaster. It saw widespread job losses, program cancellations, hard-hit areas, especially in rural, hard-hit impacts in especially rural areas. And then they had to go back and reverse this bad sort of policy measure and re-inject money into the public college system, and it's only recovering just now. So I know the government looks to Australia and the UK. These things have been tried there and they've failed and have spelled disaster and has caused people's futures. And we cannot let that happen here. They fought back in Australia, and there's still time for us to fight back, which is why I know many of you here have been on the picket lines supporting the college support staff day after day, fighting alongside them, because this fight is bigger than support staff. It's for the future of this province, our public education system, and the attacks are coming from everywhere. As we fight this fight, we also fight with you against Bill 33 and all of our fights that are connected to fight for good public services in this province. I'll stop here.
Thanks so much, Deena, and that was extremely comprehensive. We really appreciate the research that has gone into your presentation, and also I do appreciate as well that you've ended on a positive note, that there's still time for us to fight back, and that's hugely important. So thank you so much.